The morning of June 15th started like any other in Cedar Falls, Iowa, but by noon, it would become the day that changed everything. At precisely 11:47 a.m., a 2,400-pound Charolais bull named Thunderstorm smashed through 3 layers of reinforced steel fencing at Willowbrook Cattle Ranch, his massive hooves, each weighing nearly 40 pounds, churning up clouds of Iowa dust as he thundered toward the heart of the unsuspecting town. Ranch owner Ezekiel "Zeke" Thornfield stood frozen in horror as he watched 5 years of his life's work disappear in a cloud of dust and destruction. Thunderstorm wasn't just any bull. He was a champion bloodline Charolais worth over $150,000, a gentle giant who had never shown aggression toward humans in his entire life. Until today. The transformation had been sudden and terrifying. At 8:30 a.m., Thunderstorm had been peacefully grazing in his favorite spot beneath the ancient cottonwood tree, his cream-colored coat gleaming in the morning sun. By 9:15 a.m., when the livestock transportation truck from Morrison Meat Processing arrived, everything changed. Zeke's hands trembled as he recalled the desperate phone call he'd received 3 days earlier from his bank loan officer, Cornelius Blackwater. "Mr. Thornfield, I'm afraid we can't extend your loan any further. The ranch is 3 months behind on payments, and corporate has made the decision. You have 72 hours to bring the account current, or we begin foreclosure proceedings." Thunderstorm had been Zeke's last hope, his most valuable asset, and the only thing standing between him and losing the ranch that had been in his family for 4 generations. The meat processing company had offered $85,000 cash, enough to save the ranch but not enough to save his soul. As he signed the papers, Zeke felt like he was signing his best friend's death warrant. Dr. Maverick Kingston, Cedar Falls' veteran large animal veterinarian, was examining a sick calf at the Peterson farm when his emergency phone exploded with urgent calls. The first came from dispatch at 11:52 a.m. "Doc Kingston, we have a code red animal emergency on Maple Street. A massive bull has escaped and is threatening civilians." The second call came from his longtime friend and Cedar Falls Police Chief Dakota Silvermoon, whose voice carried 20 years of law enforcement experience, but none of the calm authority she was known for. "Maverick, you need to get to the elementary school playground immediately. We have a 2,400-pound bull destroying everything in sight, and there are families trapped." "Doctor." Kingston's modified Ford F-350 veterinary truck, equipped with specialized animal restraint equipment and enough tranquilizer to drop a rhinoceros, roared through the streets of Cedar Falls at speeds that would have earned him a hefty ticket under normal circumstances. But these weren't normal circumstances. As he drove, his mind raced through everything he knew about Thunderstorm. The bull had been born on the Thornfield Ranch, hand-raised by Zeke from a calf, bottle-fed when his mother rejected him, and treated more like a family pet than livestock. Thunderstorm had never shown aggressive behavior, had never charged a human, and had actually been known to seek out human company during his daily routines. Something catastrophic had happened to trigger this transformation, and Dr. Kingston had a sinking feeling he knew exactly what it was. Meanwhile, at Cedar Falls Elementary School's annual Summer Harvest Festival, the day had been progressing perfectly. Festival coordinator Serafina Meadowbrook had spent 6 months planning the event, transforming the school's playground into a wonderland of activities, food booths, and entertainment designed to bring the community together. 3-year-old Jasper Willowson was riding the miniature carousel for the 4th time, his delighted laughter mixing with the calliope music, while his grandmother, Ophelia Willowson, took photographs with her vintage Polaroid camera. Nearby, twin brothers Caspian and Orion Blackthorn, both age 7, were engaged in an epic water balloon fight that had attracted a crowd of cheering children. The Meadowbrook family, Serafina's elderly parents Sage and Willow Meadowbrook, both in their 70s, were manning the apple cider booth, ladling out steaming cups of their famous spiced cider that had won the Iowa State Fair Blue Ribbon 3 years running. Young mother Aurelia Moonstone, just 19 years old and still recovering from a difficult childbirth 2 weeks earlier, sat on a checkered picnic blanket in the shade of a massive oak tree. Her newborn son, Phoenix Moonstone, slept peacefully in her arms, blissfully unaware that this would be his first and nearly last community event. Aurelia had been hesitant to bring Phoenix out so soon after his birth, but her mother, Celestine Moonstone, had insisted. "Fresh air and sunshine are good for babies, honey. Besides, the whole town wants to meet little Phoenix. He's the first baby born in Cedar Falls this year." At exactly 11:58 a.m., Thunderstorm burst through the decorative white picket fence that surrounded the playground like it was made of paper. The sound of splintering wood and twisted metal sent a shockwave through the peaceful festival atmosphere, followed immediately by screams of terror as families realized that 2,400 pounds of enraged bull was charging directly toward them. Thunderstorm's massive horns, each measuring over 2 feet long and sharp as spears, caught the bright red frame of the playground's newest addition, a $50,000 jungle gym that had been installed just 3 months earlier with funds raised by the entire community. With a sound like thunder, the bull lifted the entire structure and hurled it across the playground, where it crashed into the carousel, sending wooden horses flying like projectiles. Grandmother Ophelia Willowson, despite being 73 years old, moved with surprising agility as she scooped up young Jasper and ran toward the school building. "Everyone inside!" she shouted with the voice of a retired schoolteacher who had commanded respect for 4 decades. "Get the children inside now!" But not everyone could escape. The Meadowbrook apple cider booth stood directly in Thunderstorm's path, and elderly Sage Meadowbrook's arthritic knees wouldn't carry him fast enough to safety. His wife Willow grabbed his arm, trying to help him toward the school, but they were moving too slowly. Dr. Kingston's truck skidded to a halt in the school parking lot just as Thunderstorm's massive hooves crushed the Meadowbrook cider booth, sending gallons of hot apple cider splashing across the playground equipment and filling the air with the incongruous scent of cinnamon and nutmeg mixed with dust and fear. "Dear God," Dr. Kingston whispered as he grabbed his emergency veterinary kit and tranquilizer rifle. In 30 years of veterinary practice, he had never seen anything like this. Thunderstorm wasn't just destroying property randomly. There was method to his rage, a focused intensity that suggested he was searching for something specific. The bull's massive head swung from side to side, his nostrils flared wide as he processed scents and sounds, his small but intelligent eyes scanning the chaos with predatory focus. His cream-colored coat was now streaked with dirt and sweat, and foam flecked his massive jaws as he panted from exertion and rage. Police Chief Dakota Silvermoon arrived on scene with 3 patrol cars and immediately began coordinating the evacuation. "I need a 3-block perimeter established immediately," she radioed to dispatch. "And get me animal control on the line. We need specialized equipment for large livestock." But even as she organized the emergency response, Chief Silvermoon's trained eye caught something that made her blood run cold. Hidden behind the wreckage of an overturned picnic table, young mother Aurelia Moonstone crouched in terror, her 2-week-old son Phoenix pressed against her chest. She was trapped, with Thunderstorm between her and any possible escape route. Every time she tried to move, the massive bull's head would swing in her direction, as if he could sense her presence through some primal instinct that transcended normal animal behavior. Dr. Kingston spotted the trapped mother and child just as he finished loading his tranquilizer rifle with enough sedative to bring down a bull Thunderstorm's size. But the shot would have to be perfect. Too little medication, and the enraged animal would continue his rampage. Too much, and the overdose could kill him. As he raised the rifle and adjusted his scope, movement caught his eye. Aurelia was trying to stand, her newborn son still cradled protectively in her arms, and in that moment, baby Phoenix chose to announce his presence to the world with a cry that would change everything. The cry that pierced through the chaos of Cedar Falls Elementary School playground was unlike anything the witnesses would ever forget. Baby Phoenix Moonstone's voice, high, pure, and desperately innocent, cut through the sounds of destruction like a silver blade through darkness. In that single moment, 2,400 pounds of pure fury came to an abrupt and complete stop. Thunderstorm's massive frame, which had been moving with the unstoppable momentum of a locomotive just seconds before, froze mid-charge. His enormous head, lowered in aggressive posture with razor-sharp horns, aimed at the overturned picnic table where Aurelia Moonstone crouched with her newborn son, slowly lifted until his intelligent brown eyes found the source of the sound. Dr. Maverick Kingston, his finger poised on the trigger of his tranquilizer rifle, watched in amazement as the transformation unfolded before his eyes. The bull's nostrils, which had been flared wide with rage, gradually relaxed. His massive shoulders, bunched with tension and aggression, began to settle. Most remarkably, his eyes, those small, intelligent windows into an animal's soul, softened from burning fury to something that looked almost like recognition. If you're as captivated by this incredible moment as we are, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. This story of an unlikely connection between fury and innocence is just beginning to unfold, and what happens next will leave you speechless. There's so much more to discover about Thunderstorm's past and the miracle that's about to unfold. Police Chief Dakota Silvermoon, who had been coordinating the evacuation from behind her patrol car, slowly rose from her defensive position. In 20 years of law enforcement, she had seen domestic disputes, armed robberies, and natural disasters. But nothing had prepared her for witnessing a raging bull respond to an infant's cry as if it carried some mystical power. "What in the Sam Hill is happening?" muttered Sage Meadowbrook, emerging from behind the wreckage of his apple cider booth where he and his wife Willow had taken shelter. His 78-year-old eyes had seen everything from the Dust Bowl of the 1930s to the farm crisis of the 1980s, but this defied every law of nature he thought he understood. Thunderstorm took one tentative step toward the overturned picnic table, then another. But these weren't the thunderous, ground-shaking steps of his earlier rampage. These were careful, almost reverent movements, as if he were approaching something sacred. His massive hooves, which had crushed playground equipment like matchsticks, now placed themselves with deliberate precision to avoid the scattered toys and debris littering the ground. Aurelia Moonstone, still clutching baby Phoenix against her chest, found herself caught between terror and bewilderment. Every maternal instinct screamed at her to run, to protect her child from the massive beast now approaching them. But something in Thunderstorm's demeanor had changed so completely that she found herself paralyzed not by fear, but by curiosity. Dr. Kingston lowered his tranquilizer rifle slightly, his medical training warring with decades of animal behavior experience. "This is impossible," he whispered to himself. "Bulls don't respond to human infants. There's no biological imperative, no evolutionary advantage. It makes no sense." But as he watched Thunderstorm's continued approach, Dr. Kingston began to remember fragments of conversation from his visits to the Thornfield Ranch. Zeke had always spoken of Thunderstorm as more than just livestock. He'd been raised by hand from birth, bottle-fed every 4 hours when his mother, a prize Charolais cow named Moonbeam, had rejected him due to complications during a difficult delivery. The memory hit Dr. Kingston like a lightning bolt. Moonbeam had died 3 days after Thunderstorm's birth, leaving the newborn calf an orphan. For the first 6 months of his life, Thunderstorm had been bottle-fed not just by Zeke, but by Zeke's entire family. The bull had been raised in the farmhouse's kitchen during his earliest weeks, sleeping in a makeshift pen next to the wood-burning stove, surrounded by the sounds and smells of human domestic life. Most significantly, Dr. Kingston now recalled, Thunderstorm had been bottle-fed by Zeke's youngest daughter, Melody Thornfield, who had been just 14 years old at the time. Every morning before school and every evening after homework, Melody would prepare Thunderstorm's formula and feed him with the patience and devotion of a human mother caring for her own child. Melody had moved to California for college 3 years ago, and Dr. Kingston suddenly realized that Thunderstorm hadn't heard the sound of a human infant since those early days when Melody's younger cousins would visit the ranch. The bull's reaction wasn't random, it was recognition. The cry of baby Phoenix had triggered memories buried deep in Thunderstorm's massive brain, memories of safety, comfort, and the loving care he had received as a vulnerable newborn himself. Thunderstorm stopped just 6 feet from the overturned picnic table, close enough that Aurelia could see her own reflection in his large, dark eyes. The bull's breathing had returned to normal, and he stood with his head tilted slightly to one side, as if listening for something specific. Baby Phoenix, perhaps sensing the change in atmosphere, gradually stopped crying. His tiny fists, which had been clenched tight against his mother's chest, slowly relaxed, and his bright blue eyes, still unfocused with newborn vision, seemed to look directly at the massive creature standing over them. "Nobody move," Dr. Kingston called softly across the playground. "Nobody make any sudden sounds. Something extraordinary is happening here, and we don't want to break the spell." Festival coordinator Seraphina Meadowbrook, who had been hiding behind the school building with a group of terrified families, slowly peered around the corner. What she saw defied everything she thought she knew about dangerous animals and protective instincts. The bull that had just demolished thousands of dollars worth of playground equipment was now standing motionless, his entire attention focused on a 2-week-old baby with the gentle intensity of a guardian angel. Grandmother Ophelia Willowson, still holding 3-year-old Jasper in her arms, whispered to Police Chief Silvermoon, "In 60 years of living in farm country, I've never seen anything like this. It's like that baby has some kind of magic in his voice." Chief Silvermoon nodded slowly, her hand moving away from her service weapon for the first time since arriving on scene. "My grandmother was half Cherokee," she replied quietly. "She used to tell stories about spirit animals, about creatures that could sense the pure innocence of newborn souls. I always thought they were just folklore." Thunderstorm lowered his massive head until his nose was just 3 feet from baby Phoenix. The bull's nostrils flared gently as he caught the scent of the infant. Not the aggressive scent analysis of a predator, but the careful investigation of a creature trying to understand something completely new yet oddly familiar. Aurelia, summoning courage she didn't know she possessed, slowly shifted her position so that Phoenix was more visible to the bull. "It's okay," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was talking to her baby, to Thunderstorm, or to herself. "He's just a little baby. He can't hurt anyone." As if responding to her words, Thunderstorm let out a soft, low rumble, not the aggressive snort of his earlier rage, but a sound that Dr. Kingston recognized as the contented murmur bulls made when they were at peace. It was the same sound Thunderstorm used to make as a calf when Melody would scratch behind his ears after feeding Time. The afternoon sun, which had been hidden behind clouds during the chaos, chose that moment to break through, casting golden light across the destroyed playground and illuminating the impossible scene. A massive bull standing guard over a mother and child, his cream-colored coat gleaming like armor in the Iowa sunshine. Dr. Kingston slowly began to move closer, his tranquilizer rifle slung across his shoulder, but his hands empty and visible. Each step was calculated, deliberate, designed to avoid triggering Thunderstorm's defensive instincts while getting close enough to intervene if the situation changed. But as he approached, Dr. Kingston realized that intervention might not be necessary. Whatever force had transformed Thunderstorm from a raging destroyer into a gentle protector seemed to be holding steady. The bull's eyes remained soft, his posture calm, his attention completely focused on the tiny human who had somehow spoken to something deep in his memory. The question now wasn't how to stop Thunderstorm's rampage. It was how to understand what had just happened and whether this miraculous transformation would last long enough to get everyone to safety. Baby Phoenix, as if sensing that he had become the center of an extraordinary moment, let out another small cry, but this time, it wasn't the desperate wail of distress that had stopped the bull's charge. This was the contented sound of a well-fed infant beginning to drift off to sleep in his mother's arms. Thunderstorm's response was immediate and unmistakable. The massive bull lay down in the grass beside the overturned picnic table, folding his legs beneath his enormous body with the careful precision of an animal determined not to frighten the tiny creature who had somehow reached across the species barrier to touch his ancient heart. The sight of Thunderstorm lying peacefully beside Aurelia Moonstone and baby Phoenix created an otherworldly tableau that left the entire community of Cedar Falls speechless. Word spread through the small Iowa town with the speed of wildfire, and within 30 minutes, nearly half the town's 3,200 residents had gathered behind the police barriers that Chief Dakota Silvermoon had hastily established around the playground. Dr. Maverick Kingston had never encountered anything like this in his 30 years of veterinary practice. He stood just 15 feet from the massive bull, close enough to see the rise and fall of Thunderstorm's breathing, close enough to notice that the animal's eyes had taken on an almost human quality of awareness as he watched over the mother and child with protective vigilance. "Doc," whispered Police Chief Silvermoon, approaching with careful steps. "How long can this last? I mean, he's still a 2,400-pound bull. What happens when his mood changes?" Dr. Kingston shook his head slowly, his clinical mind struggling to process what his eyes were seeing. "Dakota, in all my years of animal behavior study, I've never seen anything like this. Bulls don't have protective instincts toward human infants. It goes against every natural law I know." But even as he spoke, Dr. Kingston was remembering more details about Thunderstorm's unusual upbringing. The bull hadn't just been bottle-fed by the Thornfield family. He had been socialized with human children from his earliest days. Zeke's grandchildren would often visit during summer breaks, and Thunderstorm had grown up playing with toddlers, being gentle with small hands that fed him treats, learning to modulate his strength around vulnerable creatures. The sound of a truck engine roaring at dangerous speeds cut through the afternoon air. Every head turned as Ezekiel Thornfield's battered Ford pickup truck screeched into the school parking lot, its tires smoking from the emergency stop. Zeke emerged from the driver's seat like a man possessed, his weathered face etched with panic, guilt, and desperation. "Where is he?" Zeke shouted, pushing through the crowd of onlookers. "Where's Thunderstorm? Dear God, what has he done?" Chief Silvermoon intercepted Zeke before he could reach the playground. "Mr. Thornfield, you need to stay calm. The situation is unusual. Your bull isn't attacking anyone. In fact, he's—" She paused, struggling to find words for the impossible scene. "He's protecting a mother and baby." Zeke's eyes followed Chief Silvermoon's pointing finger, and when he saw Thunderstorm lying peacefully beside Aurelia and Phoenix, his knees nearly buckled. "That's impossible," he whispered. "He was in a complete rage when he broke out. I've never seen him so angry, so violent. The men from the slaughterhouse, they—" His voice broke as the full weight of his betrayal hit him. Dr. Kingston approached Zeke with careful steps. "Zeke, I need you to tell me exactly what happened this morning. Every detail. Thunderstorm's behavior suggests he was triggered by something specific." Zeke's weathered hands shook as he removed his worn baseball cap, running his fingers through gray hair that had aged a decade in a single morning. "Doc, I did something terrible. The bank was foreclosing, and Morrison Meat Processing offered cash for Thunderstorm. They came this morning with a trailer and—" He swallowed hard. "They had electric prods and restraints. They were going to force him into the trailer." The pieces of the puzzle began falling into place in Dr. Kingston's mind. Thunderstorm hadn't escaped in random fury. He had been defending himself against what he perceived as an attack. The bull had broken free not to cause destruction, but to flee from what his instincts told him was a life-threatening situation. "Zeke," Dr. Kingston said gently, "Thunderstorm wasn't acting randomly. He was running from something that terrified him, and somehow that baby's cry reached something deep in his memory, something from when he was a calf being cared for by your family." As if hearing his name, Thunderstorm lifted his massive head and looked directly at Zeke. The bull's eyes, which had been soft and protective while watching Phoenix, now held a different emotion, one that Dr. Kingston recognized as hurt and confusion. Thunderstorm remembered Zeke's voice, his smell, his presence, and couldn't understand why his human family had allowed strangers to threaten him. "He knows you betrayed him," said a voice from behind them. Everyone turned to see Celestine Moonstone, Aurelia's mother, approaching with quiet dignity. At 62, Celestine had the bearing of a woman who had raised 5 children on an Iowa farm and understood animals better than most people understood themselves. "Animals don't forgive the same way humans do," Celestine continued, her gray eyes fixed on Thunderstorm. "But they do remember love. That bull is protecting my grandson because something in that baby's cry reminded him of being loved and protected when he was vulnerable." Aurelia, who had been sitting motionless for over an hour with Phoenix in her arms, finally spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "He's not going to hurt us. I can feel it. He's trying to keep us safe." Dr. Kingston slowly approached the protective bull, his movements telegraphed and non-threatening. "Thunderstorm," he called softly, using the same gentle tone he employed with frightened animals in his clinic. "Easy, big fellow. Nobody's going to hurt you anymore." Thunderstorm's ears swiveled toward Dr. Kingston's voice, but his position didn't change. He remained lying down, creating a living barrier between the mother and child and any potential threats. His massive body blocked access from 3 sides, while his intelligent eyes continued to scan the gathered crowd for any sign of danger. Zeke took a tentative step forward, his voice thick with emotion. "Thunderstorm boy, it's me. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what I almost did to you." The bull's reaction was immediate and heartbreaking. Thunderstorm's eyes fixed on Zeke's face, and for a moment, the massive animal looked exactly like the confused, abandoned calf he had once been. A low rumble emerged from his throat, not aggressive, but questioning, as if he were asking why his protector had turned against him. The men from Morrison Meat Processing, Zeke continued, his voice breaking. They're gone. I sent them away. I told them the deal was off, that Thunderstorm wasn't for sale at any price. Dr. Kingston watched the interaction with growing understanding. Zeke, when you sent the slaughterhouse men away, what exactly did you tell them? I told them I'd rather lose the ranch than lose Thunderstorm, Zeke replied. I realized that some things are more important than money. That bull has been part of my family for 5 years. He's not livestock, he's... Zeke struggled to find the words. He's family. As if understanding every word, Thunderstorm slowly began to rise to his feet. The massive bull moved with deliberate care, ensuring that his movements wouldn't startle baby Phoenix or threaten Aurelia. Once standing, he took 2 careful steps toward Zeke, his huge head lowered in a gesture that Dr. Kingston recognized as submission and reconciliation. Zeke extended his hand toward Thunderstorm's massive head, the same gesture he had used thousands of times over the past 5 years. Come on, boy. Let's go home. I promise. Nobody's ever going to hurt you again. But Thunderstorm didn't immediately move toward Zeke. Instead, he turned back to look at Aurelia and Phoenix, as if reluctant to abandon his self-appointed guard duty. Baby Phoenix, still nestled in his mother's arms, made a small cooing sound, the contented noise of an infant who felt completely safe. The sound seemed to release Thunderstorm from his protective vigil. The massive bull took one final look at the baby, who had somehow reached across the species barrier to touch his heart, then slowly walked toward Zeke with the dignified gait of a creature who had found his way back to where he belonged. Dr. Kingston breathed a sigh of relief as he watched the reunion between man and bull. But he also realized that this extraordinary event would have lasting implications far beyond Cedar Falls. The story of Thunderstorm and baby Phoenix would challenge everything the scientific community thought they knew about animal cognition, memory, and the mysterious bonds that could form between species. As Zeke gently placed a halter on Thunderstorm's massive head, the bull turned one last time toward Aurelia and Phoenix. In his large, intelligent eyes was an expression that Dr. Kingston would spend years trying to understand, part gratitude, part benediction, and part promise that he would never forget the tiny human who had reminded him what it felt like to be loved without conditions. The crisis was over, but the miracle of what had happened in Cedar Falls that day was just beginning to be understood. 6 months later, Cedar Falls, Iowa had become known worldwide as the place where a miracle occurred, where the cry of a newborn baby stopped a raging bull and created a bond that defied every law of nature and science. The story of Thunderstorm and baby Phoenix had traveled far beyond the small farming community, inspiring researchers, veterinarians, and animal behaviorists from universities across the globe. Dr. Isa Maverick Kingston stood in his newly expanded veterinary clinic, reviewing the latest letter from the Journal of Animal Behavior Sciences. For the 3rd time, they were requesting permission to publish his detailed case study of the Cedar Falls incident. The scientific community was still struggling to understand how a 2,400-pound Charolais bull had responded to an infant's cry with protective instincts typically reserved for a mother toward her own offspring. It challenges everything we thought we knew about interspecies communication, Dr. Kingston murmured to his research assistant, Ivy Clearwater, a graduate student from Iowa State University who had moved to Cedar Falls specifically to study Thunderstorm's ongoing behavior. The neural pathways required for that kind of cross-species recognition simply shouldn't exist in bovine brain structure. But the evidence was undeniable. In the months following the playground incident, Thunderstorm had demonstrated repeatedly that his response to baby Phoenix hadn't been a one-time anomaly. Whenever Aurelia Moonstone brought 6-month-old Phoenix to visit the Thornfield Ranch, which had become a weekly tradition, Thunderstorm would position himself as a gentle guardian, showing protective behaviors that veterinary experts had previously considered impossible. The ranch itself had been transformed. Thanks to an outpouring of community support and donations from visitors who came to witness the famous bull, Ezekiel Thornfield had not only saved his family property, but had converted it into the Thunderstorm Research Center and Sanctuary. The facility now housed rescued farm animals and served as a living laboratory for studying animal cognition and interspecies relationships. Zeke had aged gracefully in the months since nearly losing everything. The guilt and desperation that had driven him to almost sell Thunderstorm to the slaughterhouse had been replaced by a profound sense of purpose. He had become an internationally recognized speaker on animal welfare, traveling to agricultural conferences across the Midwest to share his story of redemption and the lessons learned from his magnificent bull. "You know," Zeke said to a group of visitors from the University of California at Davis, "I spent 5 years thinking of Thunderstorm as livestock. Valuable livestock, but livestock nonetheless. It took almost losing him to realize that he's not property. He's a sentient being with emotions, memories, and the capacity for relationships that I never imagined possible." The visitors watched in amazement as Thunderstorm, now weighing a healthy 2,600 pounds and gleaming with perfect health, gently lowered his massive head to receive scratches behind his ears from Phoenix Moonstone, who at 6 months old showed no fear whatsoever of the enormous creature that had become his unofficial protector. Aurelia, now 20 years old and pursuing her degree in animal psychology through online courses, had become an integral part of the research team studying Thunderstorm's unique behaviors. Her initial terror during the playground incident had transformed into deep fascination with the bond between her son and the bull. "Phoenix has never known a world where Thunderstorm wasn't part of his life," Aurelia explained to Dr. Sarah Wyndham, a researcher from the National Institutes of Health who had come to document the ongoing relationship. To him, having a 2,600-pound guardian is perfectly normal. They've developed their own communication system. Phoenix makes these specific sounds that Thunderstorm responds to, and Thunderstorm has vocalizations that seem designed specifically for Phoenix. Dr. A. Wyndham was documenting phenomena that challenged fundamental assumptions about animal intelligence and emotional capacity. Her preliminary findings suggested that Thunderstorm possessed cognitive abilities far beyond what had previously been attributed to cattle, including long-term memory formation, complex emotional processing, and most remarkably, what appeared to be genuine empathy. "The implications extend far beyond veterinary science," Dr. Wyndham wrote in her interim report. "If a bovine can form protective attachments to human infants based on early socialization experiences, we need to completely reevaluate our understanding of farm animal consciousness and emotional needs." The transformation extended throughout Cedar Falls itself. The playground that Thunderstorm had destroyed in his rage had been rebuilt with community volunteers and corporate donations, but the new design included a special memorial garden dedicated to interspecies understanding and the power of innocent voices to bridge divides. Mayor Serafina Meadowbrook, who had been festival coordinator during the incident, had commissioned a bronze statue depicting the moment when Thunderstorm lay down beside baby Phoenix. The sculpture, created by renowned artist Harmony Stonefield, had become a pilgrimage site for people seeking hope and believing in the possibility of peaceful coexistence between different forms of life. Police Chief Dakota Silvermoon had incorporated the lessons learned from the Thunderstorm incident into her department's training protocols. "We learned that sometimes the most effective law enforcement isn't about force or control," she explained to a conference of rural police chiefs. "Sometimes it's about understanding what drives behavior and addressing the root cause rather than just the symptoms." But perhaps the most profound transformation had occurred in baby Phoenix himself. As he grew from newborn to infant to toddler, Phoenix displayed an unusual affinity for animals that went far beyond normal childhood fascination. He seemed to communicate with creatures in ways that left researchers speechless and convinced his mother that her son carried some special gift for bridging the gap between human and animal consciousness. Dr. Kingston often observed Phoenix during his visits to the ranch, noting behaviors that defied conventional understanding of child development. At 6 months old, Phoenix demonstrates recognition patterns with Thunderstorm that typically don't develop until 18 to 24 months, he recorded in his research notes. More significantly, he shows no fear response to the bull's size, suggesting that their bond was established at a neurological level before normal fear conditioning could occur. On a crisp October morning, exactly 10 months after the playground incident, Cedar Falls hosted the first annual Interspecies Harmony Festival. Researchers, veterinarians, animal welfare advocates, and families from across the country gathered to celebrate the ongoing relationship between Thunderstorm and Phoenix while learning about animal cognition and communication. The festival's keynote speaker was Dr. Rebecca Hartwell from the Cambridge Animal Consciousness Institute, who had traveled from England specifically to study Thunderstorm's case. What we've witnessed in Cedar Falls represents a paradigm shift in our understanding of animal emotional intelligence, she told the assembled crowd. This bull has demonstrated cognitive abilities that force us to reconsider fundamental questions about consciousness, memory, and the capacity for love across species barriers. As Dr. Hartwell spoke, Thunderstorm grazed peacefully in the meadow behind the stage, with 10-month-old Phoenix sitting safely between his massive front legs, both of them completely at ease in an arrangement that continued to amaze everyone who witnessed it. Ezekiel Thornfield took the stage for the festival's closing remarks, his voice carrying across the crowd with the authority of a man who had learned life's most important lessons through nearly losing everything. 10 months ago, I almost made the biggest mistake of my life because I thought I understood the value of things. I thought Thunderstorm was worth exactly what someone was willing to pay for him. He paused, looking toward the meadow where his bull and the baby had formed their impossible friendship. But value isn't about price tags or profit margins. Value is about connections, about love, about the courage to see beyond the surface of things, to recognize the souls that exist in forms different from our own. As the sun set over Cedar Falls, casting golden light across the meadow, where a bull and a baby continued their daily routine of mutual protection and affection, the crowd fell silent. In that moment, everyone present understood that they had witnessed something that would be talked about for generations, not just the story of how a baby's cry stopped a raging bull, but the ongoing proof that love, in its purest form, recognizes no boundaries of species, size, or circumstance. The legacy of Thunderstorm and Phoenix had become larger than either of them could have imagined. Their bond had challenged scientific assumptions, transformed a community, and provided hope to anyone who had ever believed in the power of innocence to overcome fury, understanding to bridge differences, and love to create miracles in the most unexpected places. In the years to come, researchers would continue studying their relationship, writers would immortalize their story, and children around the world would grow up knowing that sometimes the smallest voice can reach the largest heart, and that true protection comes not from strength or size, but from recognizing the sacred trust that exists between all living beings. The playground in Cedar Falls had been rebuilt, but the miracle that occurred there would never be forgotten. And somewhere in an Iowa meadow, a bull named Thunderstorm continued his gentle vigil over a growing boy named Phoenix, both of them living proof that the most powerful force in the universe is love without conditions, protection without expectation, and connection that transcends every boundary except the one that matters most, the boundary between caring and not caring at all. A wild bull in full rage demolished the playground, until the cry of a newborn baby made him freeze.